Questioners?
I actually got through them all. Sir.
Awesome.
Well, you talk about a lot about the status quo. I believe that everyone has a different view of status quo. Even we had maybe 40 people here and had 40 different status quos. And to my point that after the Xi meeting and the status quo one is end because you as a status quo say there's 3 joint communique and TRA. Okay, so since the PRC and all KMT, I mean RC or the CCP, they join together, shake hands together. That means they end their family feud. It's done. Okay. Now it's about time for Taiwan people to identify their status quo. So my only question to you: how do you stay on the status quo? Is that still on the traditional statement that the 3 joint communique and TRA, or is a different status quo to your point?
To me, I think it's the former. It really is. It's the existing mechanisms in terms of how both the U.S. and China look at this, and I think more broadly the status quo. I always put it in quotation marks. I mean, there's really no such thing. I don't think in this case. But I think that really for U.S. and for U.S. policy, and again, this is just me speaking, not for Rand and not for any of the many sponsors that we have. It's just me. This whole speech, in fact. So it really is the idea that differences are being resolved non-militarily, that continues, and that there's not coercion. And I would say maybe a little bit beyond the military realm, that there's not even heavy sort of coercion even in the economic realm for Taiwan to do anything in terms of their internal domestic political, their polity, as a result of China's pressure, particularly military. I think that's most important, but even in other domains as well. So that's status quo, and that's pretty much been the status quo. When China has sort of used coercive measures, if you will, generally speaking, that hasn't been a positive thing for them necessarily in terms of Taiwan. When things have happened positively on Taiwan for Beijing, it's a result generally of Taiwan domestic political decisions and directions. So that, to me, that's the status quo. And I think it's sustainable, that larger context. Where I think it's not sustainable and where the status quo really I think I'm getting at is not really that viable, is that there's an expectation on Beijing's part, on China's part, that Taiwan will say that there's some consensus, there's some paradigm, for lack of a better word, that both sides can use, that allows that activity to continue and allows friction to remain at a lower level. And I don't know where that's going to happen because, again, 1992 consensus is not acceptable to Tsai Ing-wen. She uses this term, the spirit of, so there's something there, but it's really not palatable. The China dream is not palatable to Taiwan's populace. I don't, if Xi Jinping believes that it is, that they somehow still believe that, that the Chineseness of the island is such that they will seize on this grand idea, this grand dream. It's not the case. So that's the part that's not. I don't think the status quo there is viable. The larger structure, I think, still can be. Sir.
Cortez, thanks for the talk. 2 questions. First, who are those 3 guys?
Do you have a better backup slide?
should I feel threatened right now?
I don't know where I got that one.
The question, Cortez, is on Taiwan deterrence. So they need capability and to demonstrate to the mainland they have the will to fight, and that capability erodes steadily after each major arms transfer. So the last really big arms transfer was the F-16. That is now not a 4th and 5th generation fighter, which the PLA is turning out. So and no one else will transfer weapons systems of that nature to Taiwan. And secondly, they not only need their own capability for deterrence, but of course, the bigger part of their deterrence is a reliable U.S. reinforcement. And that's where arms sales come together, because it's also a signal when the U.S. transfers arms of our willingness then to reinforce. So, long background to the question, then, as you look at the Taiwan armed forces, where are their big capability shortfalls? What is going to be their next big request from the United States, and what will your view be about what will China's reaction be the next time they come in with a F-16 kind of request? I don't think we're going to transfer F-22s or F-35s, but they're getting to a point that if they want to have a serious independent capability, they need that kind of stuff. What do you think Beijing's reaction is going to be when we have the next round of this, which has got to come one day?
Right, it does. And again, I will take a stab. The heart of that question really is, what's their next request? And then two parts of that would be, is it a good request, an intelligent one in terms of what they really can affect? As I said, they really need to be looking at what can they viably do to deter a high-end military operation by Beijing. And then secondly, is it even something that if it is granted that could happen and that could really drive Beijing to have a reaction that's incredibly strong. I don't know what that is. I can kind of take a stab at it, but the earlier part of the question, what you see the DPP focusing on in their defense policy, writings and their blue papers and in the briefing that at least that we got a couple of weeks ago, really I think is pretty good. They're still very much focused on the idea of submarines, and where they've gone there is they know it's going to have to be basically an indigenous production, with some help from abroad. And it would be more, I would feel better if they were to basically portray this as something that's going to be fairly low yield, fairly long term, and then you kind of understand it as being something that they think politically they have to do. And as long as it doesn't drain the defense budget too badly, if it increases, DPP says they want to get the defense budget back up to 3% from, Carson, I think you said 2% now, I'm not sure what it is right now, but get it back up to 3% where they want it to be. As long as that increase wasn't getting sucked up, by let's try to churn out indigenously submarines right now. They still focus on that, and they shouldn't be. But again, I don't think it's in such a way that it's going to drain the coffers too badly. The other two areas they really focus on are network operations and cyber capabilities. And I don't know if that's just mirror imaging the PLA. The PLA writes about the importance of information dominance and of being able to conduct both the C4ISR, the command control, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance activities they have to have in order to command and control their force and provide intelligence and targeting data, and the ability to counter C4IS operations against an adversary. In this case, pretty much the U.S. So that information operations side of the house really is a big focus of the PLA, and an area that they are, like a laser focused on. You don't know if Taiwan's focus on that is kind of mirror imaging. We know that that's what the Chinese want to do. We need to be able to defend against it. And maybe, as being in a country that's fairly advanced in our capabilities in that area, maybe we can offer some offensive capabilities in that domain, because it's not as offensive as sort of a land attack cruise missile or something like that. It's hard to tell why they think that's as critical as it is, but that's a big focus area. Now, it's an area where they could gain some interoperability advances with us if they really are focused on that, of creating some technical centers of excellence on network operations, network defense, and maybe even some network offense. If they're really serious about that, and I think the DPP is, they put it as their sort of number one when they look at actual capabilities. I think that could be good, could be helpful. Number two is the submarine thing, and again, they're not going to let go of that. But again, if it's it appears to be, at least in the DPP writings, kind of a longer-term measured approach to indigenously producing some submarines that could be of some use, against the PLA if they were to come across the strait. Now, the third big area is in the air domain, as you mentioned. I do think they're still going to, quietly, I assume, but I don't know, push for F-35 potentially. They're going to look for external sources. They say so, and I think that again, it's just not. It's an area they need to let go of. They do need to upgrade their current F-16AB and plan to do that. They do need to upgrade their own indigenous defense fighter in terms of capabilities. They can get that to being around a fourth generation capability. They say they're going to focus in that same area on unmanned aerial vehicles, both armed and unarmed, and I think that could be, depending on what specific capabilities they focus on, that could be very helpful. So I'd feel a little more confident that if they were basically to say we're not going to get back, the air domain, we're not going to get back air superiority, and the DPP kind of says that, but they still stress this idea of needing to upgrade those capabilities. So it wouldn't surprise me if they still came back with, look, we've got to at least have, something like F-35 capabilities to at least buy time against the PLA, because they're really big on this idea, and I guess it's true, that they're already under a Chinese, ADIS, if you will. That basically they're already there, and that and that they have to be able to somehow roll that back a little bit. I don't buy that that's going to be great. What I think is heartening is capabilities like defensive mining. Not in there so much in their strategy writings, but if you see the briefings right now, things that the Ministry of Defense is focusing on, and that I think that a DPP administration would continue to focus on. Defensive mining is one of them, and I think that's incredibly useful. A couple other areas like that. Oh, the fast attack missile craft. So there are some things they can do surface-wise in the maritime domain at not great cost. That I think they're focusing. They're really proud of the capabilities they're building for a missile boat, because they do have good missile capabilities. So you put them on a fast attack craft that could do significant damage to an invasion force. I think that's a good thing. So you combine that with defensive mining and other things. The other big issue is not so much what they ask the U.S., but it's any progress they make in integrated sort of command and control, or coordinated. You can't use the really integrated term, but coordinated command and control. I think technically they are internally doing some of the right things, but they're also in the middle of their own reorganization, both of the active force and the reserve force. It's kind of, they keep pushing back their objectives. It's a bit in disarray. You can have the technical means, but if your force is in the middle of a major thrash in terms of, are we going volunteer or all volunteer, this much volunteer, what's our reserve force going to do? You can understand sometimes that the U.S. will look at that and say, the best we can hope for is kind of time-space deconfliction, and we will determine what we need to do. But that's not a good answer. Probably not a great answer to your question, but that's kind of where they are, and I'm a little bit optimistic that there still is some of this sort of shiny object obsession, if you will.